What are your superpowers again?
I'm rich.
We have a Hulk.
There was a time when both Marvel and DC were hyping up their rivalry as a way to sell more comic books. But when they took their stories off the page and into the movie theater, Marvel left DC in the dust. But while Marvel is breaking box office records now, that doesn't mean it'll always be the case. Comic book fans love a good redemption story. Could it be the time for the DCEU to redeem itself and maybe even come out ahead of Marvel? Could Avengers Endgame really have been the end of the franchise?
He's pretty good at that, right?
We're sure we don't have to explain to CBR fans why Endgame was such a great movie. If you didn't lose your mind when Cap wielded Mjolnir, well, you probably aren't watching this video right now. But while us comic book fans appreciate a high-quality superhero movie, Endgame was really so much more than just a single great movie. It was a great movie that beat James Cameron's Avatar as the highest-grossing movie at the box office. But it was also a testament to how successful the Marvel Cinematic Universe has become. We know it's hard to think back that far, but there was a time before superhero movies were really a thing. And people weren't exactly getting hyped years in advance about seeing some hero called Iron Man fight crime on the big screen. Wow, a narcissistic billionaire who made a fortune as an arms dealer? Sounds like a likable guy. When fans heard about the first Iron Man movie back in 2008, they weren't exactly imagining themselves crying their eyes out over this guy in about a decade. Thanos was a powerful villain, but part of the reason he was so successful as a character was because he was built up over such a long period of time. We started getting excited about seeing the Mad Titan since we saw that stupid fake Infinity Gauntlet in Odin's vault all the way back in Thor. And when it was revealed that he was the guy behind Loki's actions during the Avengers, it was a big deal. Endgame wasn't just a great movie, nor was it just the sequel to Infinity War. It was the result of a decade's worth of films that worked together to create an incredible universe filled with characters we care about. The Infinity Saga was a massive achievement in cinematic history, and it makes the DCEU look like even more of a mess in comparison. Now we know in many ways that this is a subjective subject. We could argue about whether Iron Man could beat Batman in a fight based on their comic book histories, list of gadgets, etc, etc. Frankly, we're getting a little distracted just thinking about it. So we're not trying to say that Marvel is better than DC because we can't make that decision for you. If you like Justice League better than Endgame, that's your opinion, even if the majority of people disagree with you. But when you look at it in terms of which franchise is bringing in more money and has a bigger fan base, then Marvel comes out ahead. Way ahead. But does that mean it's always going to be the case? In fact, one of the main reasons DC is lagging behind at this point is because they've been reacting to Marvel's success instead of being proactive about their own projects. If you look back at the history of these comic book companies, you'll see that whenever one of them takes a risk, they tend to pull ahead. Spider-Man was considered revolutionary when he was introduced because there was no teenage heroes who weren't overly eager sidekicks to adults. But Marvel lagged way behind other comic book publishers when it came to strong, independent female characters, while Wonder Woman was one of the first to be widely known. While Marvel took years building up to the Avengers, DC started mashing together Batman vs. Superman: Dawn of Justice as soon as Man of Steel came out. And then the very next year after that, Justice League came out and was a massive financial failure. MCU movies aren't perfect by any means, but there have been some plot lines that never went anywhere, like the leader at the end of The Incredible Hulk. But overall, the DCEU seems to suffer from a serious lack of planning and foresight, which could be a direct consequence of them trying to follow the MCU format. One of the main reasons fans cite for preferring one fictional universe over the other is the characters. Building an awesome cinematic universe doesn't mean anything if it's not filled with characters we care about. Sure, we all like watching intense action scenes and heroes showing off their incredible powers, but that can only take you so far. If you're not invested in the characters, then it's hard to get invested in the fight because who cares who wins at that point? And Marvel is really good at making us care about their characters, even ones who are pretty seriously flawed. Peter Quill is kind of a huge jerk, and don't even get us started on his spaceship cleaning habits. Ugh. In fact, a big part of Guardians of the Galaxy was the fact that these heroes are unlikable and difficult to get along with. But somehow they all managed to work together and we love them for it. Even some of Marvel's villains can't help but be likable. Loki's a bad guy, but you kinda have to feel bad for him considering what a terrible adoptive father he had growing up. Eric Killmonger is a villain, but he does have some valid points. But let's not sleep on the DC characters here. Whether or not you like how they've been portrayed in movies so far, you have to admit there are tons of amazing heroes and villains in DC Comics. Batman and Superman are two of the most well-known and much-loved heroes of all time. Before Guardians of the Galaxy hit theaters, they were all practically unknown heroes who haven't even been in major comic book events. And yet Marvel managed to turn these random characters into an insanely profitable franchise. So just imagine what DC could do with their huge library of instantly recognizable characters that already have a huge fan base. There's Wonder Woman, Aquaman, The Flash, and Green Lantern, just to name a few. And even though they've been on the big screen before, doesn't mean it's too late to shake things up. We know the movie Joker isn't part of the DCEU, but hear us out. The Joker is one of the most well-known comic book villains of all time. He's been in tons of comics, movies, video games, and TV shows over the years, but people still aren't sick of him. One of the main reasons Joker is such a great movie is because it delivers a new version of a classic character, and that's something audiences just love. If that can be done with one of the most prolific DC villains out there, then the sky's the limit when it comes to revamping other characters within the confines of the DCEU. And one of Marvel's strengths right now might just end up being a serious weakness in the future. The first 3 phases of Marvel movies have been very family-friendly titles. Sure, there's some violence and language, but nothing past the PG-13 level. Disney likes to cast a wide net for their films, and appealing to a larger audience means more people can buy tickets. It makes sense from a practical standpoint, but it does limit the kinds of movies you can make. But DC movies don't have to fit into a PG-13 rating. The revamped Suicide Squad is going to be the R-rated follow-up to Suicide Squad, and it's directed by James Gunn, who is responsible for Marvel's widely successful Guardians of the Galaxy movies. And that's just one of the new DCEU movies that are in the works. There's a lot to look forward to right now, including The Flash, Black Adam, and The Batman. And of course, there are sequels to popular DC movies coming out, such as Wonder Woman 1984 and Aquaman 2. Just because the DCEU didn't start out as strong as the MCU doesn't mean it can't improve. It has access to a cast of amazing comic book characters, and the freedom to bring them to the big screen in ways that Disney isn't interested in. The MCU has always had a lot of characters, but how many of them do people really care about seeing? Were people as excited about seeing Rhodey in Iron Man 2 as they were about Tony Stark? How many participants in the airport fight during Captain America Civil War did fans expressly buy tickets to see? Folks like Tony Stark and Steve Rogers had been carrying the team for quite some time, and now they've been taken out of the game. Captain Marvel might be able to punch a spaceship apart, but can she carry the burden of keeping the MCU great? Of course, there are tons of side characters who have plenty of fans, including Loki, Bucky Barnes, and Sam Wilson. But instead of focusing on these characters in the movies, they're going to be relegated to the Disney Plus platform, as if we needed yet another streaming service in our lives. We've waited so long to see Darcy Lewis in the MCU again, but instead of being a part of the Thor franchise, she's being relegated to the show WandaVision. Will the shows end up helping the MCU stay relevant, or will they just end up diluting the existing character pool? Of course, we'd be lying if we said we aren't excited about Marvel's Phase 4. There are lots of new and exciting movies and TV shows coming down the pipeline, with an exciting mix of both new and familiar characters. But it's definitely going to be a big change. And a big change means a big risk. So many classic characters are gone as of Avengers Endgame that the landscape of the MCU has changed in a big way. While she was alive, Natasha Romanoff was easily the most mishandled character in the MCU. While we're glad she's finally getting a standalone movie, it's going to be a prequel, and Natasha isn't going to be around in the future. Then there are characters like the Eternals, who aren't ultra-popular and prolific in the comics, and Shang-Chi, whose character has some very problematic aspects early on. Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness is supposed to be more like a horror movie than a typical superhero flick, and Thor: Love and Thunder will have Jane Foster as Mighty Thor. There are lots of ways these movies could turn out amazing, but there are also lots of ways they could go wrong. And there won't be any Iron Man to suddenly show up and save the day if things get bad. Looking at you, Spidey. Of course, we do have Spider-Man back in the MCU, but how long is that going to last? We almost lost him when Disney and Sony couldn't come to a compromise, and how long are they going to play nice? It's also possible that if the MCU does want to keep Peter Parker around, they might end up muddying their universe with Sony's. Even without the existing roster of upcoming DCEU movies, that could be pretty disastrous. And let's talk about a very special problem facing both Marvel and DC: superhero fatigue. Basically, it's the idea that superhero movies are like a trend, and like all trends, people will eventually get tired of them. People have been predicting superhero fatigue since pretty much the moment superhero movies became popular in the first place, and if anything, they've only grown bigger and better since then. But that doesn't mean it'll never happen, just that it may happen later than people originally predicted. After all, even classic comic books have ebbed and flowed in popularity over the years. The whole reason Sony owns the movie rights to Spider-Man is because Marvel was facing bankruptcy and was desperate to bring in some cash. They even offered up heroes like Iron Man, Thor, the Black Panther, and Ant-Man, all for the price of $25 million. But instead, Sony paid $10 million for Spider-Man and called it a day. Hey, hindsight's 20/20 after all. Endgame might have been the peak of the MCU and a massive cinematic achievement, but for all we know, it could have signaled the beginning of the end. While DC Comics have a variety of amazing characters to pull from, their movie track record has a lot to be desired. We love a good underdog story, but at this point, we're hoping Marvel keeps mixing beloved characters with new ideas and dominating the box office. Do you think the DCEU will eventually surpass the MCU? Let us know what you think in the comments section and then click on the subscribe button for more videos from CBR. Bye for now.